Right now, as you read these words, a silent machine is operating directly beneath the earth, entirely out of sight, moving millions of dollars of highly volatile energy across thousands of miles. Most people look at the global energy market and see a chaotic world of shifting oil prices, geopolitical wars, and drilling tycoons making or losing fortunes overnight. But behind this chaotic curtain lies a hidden, hyper-lucrative financial system that doesn't care about the price of oil at all. Think about this striking contradiction. When the price of crude oil famously crashed below $0 a barrel, drilling companies went bankrupt, and oil traders lost everything. Yet the companies that own the pipelines transporting that very same oil recorded near-record profits. How can a business thrive when the very product it carries is deemed completely worthless by the market? The truth is, most people completely misunderstand where the real money is made in the energy sector. It isn't in finding the resource, and it isn't in selling it to the consumer. By the end of this investigation, you will understand the hidden economic engine that makes these steel networks the ultimate toll booths of modern capitalism. You will see exactly how they lock in guaranteed revenue for decades, why competitors are legally powerless to stop them, and the terrifying, invisible risk that could turn these multi-billion-dollar assets into worthless buried scrap metal. When we look out our car windows during a long road trip, we might occasionally spot a cleared strip of land cut through a dense forest, marked only by small, yellow warning signs. To the untrained eye, this is just infrastructure, a simple, boring utility pipe buried 6 feet under the mud. Acting as a passive straw connecting an oil field to a distant city, we assume the economics are straightforward. They pump the liquid through, sell it to a refinery, and take a small cut for the delivery service, much like a digital delivery app delivering food to your door. But this simple view is a carefully maintained illusion, because if you analyze the balance sheets of these pipeline operators, you quickly notice something completely illogical for a standard delivery service. Their profit margins don't look like those of a shipping company operating in a competitive market. They look like the margins of a software monopoly. In a normal business, if your customers experience an economic downturn, your revenue plummets. But in the pipeline world, the revenue stream remains eerily flat, predictable, and entirely detached from the economic reality of the surrounding world. This predictability raises a profound question. If the energy market is one of the most volatile, risky, and unpredictable sectors on the planet, how did a buried piece of steel become the safest financial asset on Wall Street? To find the answer, we have to dig past the physical dirt and look at the invisible legal architecture that prevents anyone else from ever competing with them. Imagine building a highly profitable retail store only for a competitor to open a bigger, shinier store right across the street the following year, cutting your market share in half. This is the fundamental risk of capitalism. Competition eats away surplus profits until margins shrink to bare minimums. But fuel pipelines operate under a completely different set of economic rules, known as a natural monopoly. If a pipeline company spends $2 billion laying a massive line from a production basin to a major port, it makes absolutely no economic sense for another company to spend another $2 billion laying an identical pipe right next to it. Because of this physical reality, regulatory bodies grant these companies exclusive geographic domains, meaning once your pipe is in the ground, you effectively own the exclusive right-of-way. It is the equivalent of owning the only bridge across a massive, rushing river. Anyone who wants to get to the other side has no choice but to pay your fee, but it gets even better for the operator. Because laying these networks requires immense capital, regulatory approval, and the controversial use of eminent domain to seize private land, the barrier to entry isn't just high, it is practically insurmountable. This creates a flawless competitive moat, a business that cannot be copied, cannot be disrupted by a nimble tech startup, and cannot be bypassed by its customers. Yet, having a monopoly is useless if your customers can simply choose not to use your service when times get tough. Which brings us to the most brilliant and predatory contractual mechanism ever designed by corporate lawyers. In a standard market, you pay for what you consume. If you don't take a flight, the airline doesn't charge you for the seat. If you don't use electricity, your utility bill drops to zero. But if you are an oil producer wishing to secure space in a premium pipeline network, you are forced to sign a contract that completely flips this logic on its head. These agreements are called ship-or-pay contracts, and they are the secret reason why pipeline companies sleep soundly during global economic crises. Under a ship-or-pay agreement, an energy company guarantees that they will move, for example, 50,000 barrels of oil through the pipeline every single day for the next 15 to 20 years. Here is the catch. If the market crashes or their wells dry up, or they choose to produce absolutely nothing. They are still legally obligated to pay the pipeline owner for the full 50,000 barrels of capacity every single day. The pipeline isn't selling transportation, it is selling capacity. It is renting out space inside a steel cylinder. And that rent is due whether the space is empty or full. This effectively shifts 100% of the market risk away from the infrastructure owner and places it squarely on the shoulders of the customer. The customer becomes an economic hostage to their own production choices, locked into fixed payments that stretch out across decades. This makes us wonder, why on earth would any sane energy company agree to such incredibly one-sided, punishing terms? To understand the psychology of the customer, you have to understand the terrifying physical reality of oil and gas production. Once a multi-million-dollar well is drilled and begins flowing, the resource has to go somewhere immediately. You cannot easily store millions of barrels of volatile liquid in backyards or makeshift tanks without incurring catastrophic costs. If a producer cannot get their product to a refinery or a port, they are forced to shut down the well, a process that can permanently damage the reservoir and cost millions of dollars to restart. The pipeline operator knows this. They understand that their pipe is the literal oxygen supply line for the producer's entire business. Therefore, the producer willingly signs the 20-year ship-or-pay contract because the alternative is complete, immediate corporate death. This creates a fascinating economic asymmetry. The pipeline owner has massive capital expenditures upfront to build the line, but once the steel is buried, their ongoing operational costs are remarkably low. They don't need a massive army of laborers. They don't need constant marketing campaigns, and they don't need to innovate their product every year to stay relevant. They simply need to maintain pressure inside a tube, monitor automated valves from a control room, and let the laws of physics and contractual obligation do the heavy lifting. But transport fees are actually just the baseline revenue, because hidden deep within the physics of moving fluids lies a secondary, completely secret profit engine that most retail investors never realize exists. When you pump millions of gallons of liquid through thousands of miles of steel pipe under immense pressure, physics throws an interesting curveball into the financial equations. Temperature changes, elevation shifts, and pressure variations cause liquids to compress, expand, or experience minor evaporation. To account for these natural physical variances, pipeline contracts include a small, seemingly harmless clause known as an allowance for tender deductions or a system loss allowance. Essentially, the pipeline company tells the customer that due to unavoidable operational loss, they are allowed to deliver roughly 0.1% to 0.5% less volume at the destination than what was originally pumped in at the start. This sounds completely reasonable, an expected cost of doing business in the physical world. However, modern pipeline networks are masterpieces of engineering, utilizing advanced friction-reducing agents and hyper-precise thermal management systems that make actual physical loss near zero. Do you see the massive economic loophole this creates? If a pipeline moves 2 million barrels of oil a day, a tiny 0.5% allowance means they are contractually permitted to lose 10,000 barrels of oil every single day. But since they didn't actually lose it, that extra phantom volume belongs entirely to the pipeline operator, who can then sell that excess oil directly onto the open market for pure 100% profit. It is a hidden, multi-million-dollar bonus cash flow generated out of thin air, hidden completely inside the margins of engineering tolerances. Seeing these massive, risk-free cash flows, an outside investor might assume that growing a pipeline business is as simple as raising capital, buying more steel, and burying more pipes across the country. But this is where the industry hits a brutal, hidden wall that separates the elite operators from the failures. Expanding a physical network is not like scaling a software application, where adding 1 million new users costs virtually nothing. Every new mile of pipe requires navigating a minefield of local politics, environmental lawsuits, indigenous land claims, and shifting regulations. The upfront cost to build a major pipeline can run into the billions of dollars. Money that must be spent completely upfront, years before a single dollar of revenue is ever collected. To fund this, pipeline operators must take on massive amounts of debt, structuring their businesses as complex financial entities designed to constantly juggle high leverage while paying out steady distributions to investors. If a project gets delayed by an environmental lawsuit for just 12 months, the interest payments on that idle debt can burn through hundreds of millions of dollars, destroying the economics of the project before it even opens. This means the true skill of an elite pipeline operator isn't engineering. It is legal warfare and financial engineering. They must master the art of securing rights of way, the permanent legal permissions to occupy land, which become more valuable than the physical steel itself. This intense difficulty in building new lines creates an incredible dynamic for existing infrastructure. It means old, already buried pipelines become steadily more valuable every year because they simply cannot be replaced. They are shielded from the threat of future competition by the sheer impossibility of getting new permits approved in the modern political climate. Yet, this extreme defensive advantage conceals a quiet, existential threat that is slowly ticking away beneath the soil. Steel pipes, no matter how well coated or protected by cathodic electrical currents, are ultimately mortal assets,